Watch this video, then we'll talk.
There are an increasingly large number of women who are just choosing not to get married and are choosing to stay single. There's a mating crisis going on, and that women who are becoming increasingly college educated and getting access to resources of their own, that they do continue to exhibit an increased preference for partners with resources. Women are what we call hypergamous, right? Which means that we like to mate up in terms of achievement and educational attainment. And when you have a populace like we do in the US of women who are now on average more educated than men, it makes it more difficult to find a suitable partner. If you're a woman with an advanced degree and you want somebody who has at least as much education for you, that's going to lead to a more narrow pool of mates. And in fact, what we see is that there are an increasingly large number of women who are just choosing not to get married and are choosing to stay single. And in fact, there's a wonderful book called All the Single Ladies that is about this very phenomenon. And women are increasingly choosing to opt out of long-term mating if they're not able to find the relationship that they want. There are an increasingly large number of women who are just choosing not to get married and are.
For the very last time, we are not having a mating crisis. What's happening is that women have access to information and education in ways that they didn't have in previous generations. We can now share stories and choose the bear. We can now own homes, open bank accounts. We know that. And we're not hypergamous as in we mate upwards. It was a necessity because we were blocked from owning things. You centralized through patriarchy the only access to independence and some form of survival and wealth into men, forcing women to have to choose. And as soon as we dismantled parts of the patriarchy to allow access to education, employment, financial stability independently, we exercised our choice. It is not a crisis, it's a liberation.
I saw a post floating around recently, and the text on it was so simple, but it was still quite upsetting, and it got me thinking. It just said, "More women are rejecting marriage because they watched too many wives become exhausted mothers to grown men." I stared at that screenshot for a solid minute, because it perfectly captures the quiet collective strike happening right now among young women. We are looking at the institution of marriage, looking at what it actually cost us, and collectively deciding to pass. But before we even talk about the exhaustion, we have to talk about the data, because society loves to push this narrative that single women are miserable, lonely, and desperate for a ring. The actual statistics tell a completely different story. Sociologists have been tracking this for years, and the data is glaring. The happiest, healthiest demographic of people in our society are unmarried, childless women. They live longer, they have better mental health, and they report higher levels of daily satisfaction. And on the flip side, the people who benefit the most from marriage are men. Married men live significantly longer, make more money, and are happier than single men. Meanwhile, married women often see a decline in their physical and mental health compared to their single peers. Men are literally extracting health, wealth, and longevity from the unpaid care work of their wives. The math is right there. Marriage is statistically a health hazard for women and a life raft for men. And that realization brings us to the root of the issue. We have to look at what marriage actually is, historically speaking. We grew up completely saturated in Disney movies and rom-coms that sold us marriage as the ultimate romantic achievement, the grand prize. But historically, marriage had absolutely zero to do with love or romance. It was an economic transaction. It was a survival strategy. For a massive chunk of recent history, women literally could not participate in society without a husband. You couldn't buy property. In many places up until the 1970s, a woman couldn't even open a basic bank account or get a credit card without a male relative or a husband co-signing for her. Women didn't get married because they were overwhelmingly swept off their feet by a guy's sparkling personality. They got married because they legally had to attach themselves to a man just to secure a roof over their heads and put food on the table. Financial dependency was the entire foundation of the institution. Fast forward to today, that foundation is completely gone. Women are outperforming men in almost every academic metric. We are entering the workforce, building our own credit, buying our own homes, and completely securing our own bags. So the fundamental question has changed. Women are sitting here, fully capable of funding our own lives, asking, if I don't need you for survival, what exactly are you bringing to the table? And unfortunately, for a lot of men, the answer is just more work.
What advice would you give your younger self?
To never marry. To never marry. I think that I could have done all the things that I have done without a man. When my two husbands and my father all died within 3 months. And I found myself Betty, because I was no longer Betty Charbonnet, no longer Betty Reed. I was no longer defined by someone else's name.
A lot of people are opting out of marriage now. Like, I hear a lot of young people saying, I ain't never getting married. I'm not getting married. And that's all that young people used to want to do, get married. So I think the appeal of marriage is no longer what it used to be because of how sorry these men are and how much better these women are doing in finance and society and just living on their own. I think that a lot of times people don't want to give up their space, their privacy, their freedom in exchange for someone who doesn't appreciate them, you know? So even though I was married for 20 years and with the same person for 25 years, you can take it from me that now that I'm living without a man in the house, I actually sadly like it better. Even though I was married for 20 years, it's so much better living without another person in the house where you can do whatever you want, decorate how you want, make sure, like, you know, stuff is where you left it. They're not going to mess stuff up. You don't have to treat them like a child. You know, it's so much easier. And so now that I'm able to do so and have everything that I want, how I want it, it's a beautiful thing. No compromise. And it stays the same way. You don't have to worry about anything. It's just very peaceful.
Is there anybody who's happily married? I saw a video on my For You page a few days ago and I opened the comments and tell me why majority of the women were saying not to get married. There was this lady talking about something, I've been happily married for 26 years and the one advice that I have is not to get married. What do you mean by that? There were other women talking about something, if I could go back, I wouldn't get married. You know what I'm saying? At this point, just tell me. For real, like, what is it? Like, what's going on? Like, should we get married? Should we not get married? Like... And you know that quote that goes like, smart people learn from their own experiences while wise people learn from the experiences of others. Like, I'm really trying to be wise for real, you know? So if this is a universal experience, then, you know what I'm saying? I might have to really sit the whole marriage thing out for real. So, like, just let me know. Actually, let us know.
Single Desi women don't even want to get married. Let's talk about this. This is so true. I think especially amongst women who have their own career, do not require financial support. They're starting to see that they have standards and that a lot of men are not catching up to it. These men probably still benefit from patriarchy, and these women are not going to tolerate these gender norms and these expectations that a lot of men have for what women are supposed to do for them. I have Desi friends who are just not willing to settle, and I tell them, do not settle. It is not worth it. And honestly, it's not even just about getting married. Like, if you are going to be in a relationship, especially with a man, then be sure that this person is making your life better. If not, then you are just basically laboring for free. And it's unfortunate that so many women are not able to find reciprocal companionship. But that is unfortunately the result of patriarchy and these gender norms and women having more choices, which is a good thing, but unfortunately it hasn't been able to catch up yet.
You guys know that creator with a list of reasons not to have kids, and she adds to it every time someone posts a viral TikTok of the perils of being a parent? I'm making a list of reasons not to get married if you're a heterosexual woman, and I have a few reasons. Number one is the wedding vow videos that have gone viral recently. The Come On Cody one, I would rather not get married. Number two is how I see married men talk about their wives. Let's just think about Simone Biles. She's Simone Biles. Her standards, the kind of men around her, should be way better than the kind of men around me. And I still wouldn't want her marriage. Next, famous men leaving their long-term partners after they hit a career high. I'm thinking Austin Butler. I'm thinking Barry Keoghan. Next is that one TikTok couple, Matt and Abby, and honestly most TikTok couples. But their one video of him like cleaning up the kitchen as a surprise for his wife after she gave birth, but then not even finishing cleaning up the kitchen, and then she came home and helped him finish cleaning up, and him in the comments fighting for his life, that video sticks with me. I also just saw a video of a woman who had COVID and her son had COVID, and then she came out of isolation and saw that her husband had left a mess in their kitchen, like moldy food, a ton of trash, and he had left it for her to clean up. Her husband, the father of her child. The most recent thing for me is this. A lot of new research has shown that women our age keep getting more progressive, but young men keep becoming more conservative. And if you as a woman want to marry somebody who aligns with your values, the pool is getting slimmer and slimmer. All this to say that I actually don't personally know more than a few couples whose relationships I deeply admire and respect. In most of them, the man does not treat the woman well. And this is in relationships that I personally know, like adults I know. And also that statistic that men are happier in marriages and women are less happy after they get married. And I just found out about shut up rings. I'm a huge romantic, and that's why. Marriage is becoming less and less palatable every day.
Reasons why I don't want to get married, I actually made a list because I have ADHD and I will go around the world before I get to the point. I'm kind of doing that right now. So starting with number one, studies have shown that single childless women live longer, and I do believe that. I also don't like the idea of sharing my space with someone in the long-term sense. That really freaks me the fuck out. It's actually really disgusting and ghetto. Unless I'm married rich or into land or into, something tangible, I literally wouldn't benefit from it. I don't want kids, and because I don't want kids, I kind of don't really see the point in getting married, because marriage mostly seems like a construct to raise your children in, right? And that's just how I view things. I don't want to be emotionally responsible for someone long term. I feel like marriage would be a backup plan for me. I saw someone say that in a marriage, you're going to work 10 times harder for that life of leisure, married to, a provider man, blase, versus just doing it yourself and, working hard and getting your education and doing what you need to do to make sure you can provide the life that you want for yourself. Being the rich man versus marrying the rich man. Being the hypergamous woman that I am, there is always some sort of a benefit for me when it comes to having a man in my life. That's where I draw the line. I'm not looking for anything that goes further than that. I'm not looking for the commitment of marriage. And in order to be in my presence, there are some things that are non-negotiables. And that's just what it is. Those are just some of my many reasons. I don't judge anyone for what they desire. If a person wants to get married or have kids, that's to each their own. Seriously.
The modern rebrand of marriage is this idea of the 50-50 partnership. It sounds great, right? We split the rent, we split the bills, we are equals. But the 50-50 marriage is a scam. It is almost always a financial split, completely ignoring the physical and emotional split. Women fought tooth and nail for the right to enter the workforce, to have careers, and to make our own money. But while we were entering the corporate world, men never made the reciprocal leap into the domestic sphere. So now, women are paying half the mortgage, working a full 40-hour week, and then coming home to what sociologists call the second shift. You finish your paid job, walk through your front door, and immediately start your unpaid job. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, organizing. We essentially just doubled our own workload. And this is where that screenshot I mentioned earlier really comes into play. The exhaustion doesn't just come from physically folding the laundry. It comes from the mental load. It is the soul-crushing reality of weaponized incompetence. It's when a grown man intentionally does a household task so poorly, like putting dish soap in the dishwasher or shrinking your clothes, that you just give up and do it yourself because it's easier. It's having to be the project manager of your own home. You have to write the grocery lists, remember his mother's birthday, schedule the doctor's appointments, and delegate tasks to a partner who acts like an intern in a house he also lives in. Just tell me what needs to be done, and I'll do it. We hear that phrase all the time, but having to delegate is still work. Women are exhausted because we are project managing adult men who refuse to manage themselves. When you listen to women talk about that level of burnout, it makes complete sense why so many of us are opting out. Because marriage, as it currently functions, is a massive threat to female ambition. When you are in your late 20s, maybe pouring everything you have into your corporate career or juggling your day job while grinding through an online master's degree. Your free time is your most precious currency. The energy you have at the end of the day is exactly what you use to build your wealth, plan your future, and invest in yourself. Why on earth would you willingly trade that hard-earned momentum to become someone's unpaid household manager? There is a reason the leaky pipeline of female ambition often happens right after women move in with a partner or get married. The sheer volume of domestic and emotional labor required to sustain a husband literally drains the energy a woman needs to sustain her own goals. You cannot build an empire when you are spending 3 hours a day picking up someone else's socks and regulating their emotions. We are realizing that protecting our peace and our potential means protecting our time. And right now, marrying a man is one of the quickest ways to lose your time entirely.
For most women, there is no benefit to marriage, okay? Even statistics show this. Married women die sooner. They have more health issues. For most women, it's going to be a lose-lose situation when you decide that you are going to get married. If you are trying to get married, the only way marriage makes sense is if you are logistical. Most women are not logistical. Most women just want love. That's all they care about. You must be logistical if you're going to get married. You need to write up a prenup. I cannot believe that there are women that get upset about a man asking them for a prenup when you also can write up a prenup. Put a cheating clause in there. Men are guaranteed to cheat. You might as well have some monetary reimbursement for them cheating. So put a cheating clause in there. And as long as you have proof of him cheating, you are granted X amount of money in the prenuptial agreement. He needs to be a man that actually has something, right? He can give you land, a rental property, a home, something monetary so that dealing with him makes sense to you. But marriage for love should never be on the table. It should never be a reason why you would ever want to get married, because that's not real. So, yeah. Marry rich, protect yourself, and get some form of reimbursement for a man being a man.
Someone on here said that getting married and having kids is a shortcut to feeling accomplished, and honestly, they're right. Women specifically are taught that those milestones are what make a successful adult. So deciding to follow that script is the path of least resistance, especially when what is promised on the other side are things like people saying congratulations, big celebrations, and maybe most importantly, this feeling of doing something right. And we are also taught from a very young age that as long as we follow the rules, we will be rewarded. The school system is a perfect example of this, right? Like, as long as we read these chapters and do the homework and study for the test, we are going to get a good grade on that test. But life is not that simple and straightforward. Hard work does not always directly correlate to success, just like marriage and kids does not always directly correlate to a sense of fulfillment. I also think this is why we hear about quarter life and midlife crises, because this is the time when people start reflecting on their past decisions and choices and come to this conclusion that maybe their life is not what they wanted it to be or what they expected. And That is usually because they were going through the motions instead of checking in with themselves while going through those motions. This is also why child-free single women can be so triggering to people, because they are proof that there was another choice, that happiness and fulfillment and success can be achieved in other ways besides what was sold to us.
For most of my life, especially when I was younger, I wanted to get married. I wanted to be someone's wife and get a little ringy ding on my finger. And looking back now, because I no longer want to get married, and marriage is one of the most scary and repulsive concepts that I can imagine. I look back and think that the only reason why I wanted to get married was because I was conditioned to believe that's what I should want. And I was conditioned to believe, like so many women are, that marriage is this thing about love and commitment and finding your soulmate, but that's just not true. And we're going to talk about why I no longer see marriage that way. And this video is not to shame the women that do want to get married and the women that are married, absolutely the fuck not. But I do think it's important for women to know and understand the true basis of marriage and why it was a thing in the first place. So marriage became a thing about 5,000 years ago when humans started to settle, farm land, and accumulated wealth. Men needed to know and keep track of their offspring. They needed to know which offspring was theirs, because at that point it was kind of, mixed around, and the only people that were sure of who their offspring was the mothers, okay? Because how could you not know? It's coming out of your body. The men needed to know who their offspring was so that they knew who was going to inherit their property, their assets, their wealth. So in order for men to know who their offspring was, they needed to find a way to take ownership of the mothers. And that is where marriage comes into play. Marriage is simply a form of ownership over women. It is a way for men to know who owns what. The man now owns the woman and whatever offspring that she gives him. And of course, marriage was also a way to control women's sexuality and guarantee paternity, right? And you guys, this is why I literally cannot. Because back then, when this was created, when marriage became a thing, women were seen as property. Women were seen as something to be owned and not as human beings. Women were owned by their fathers before they were owned by the men that they married. And that is why today, even today, bro, the father walks the bride down the aisle because he's giving away ownership of that woman to another man. When marriage was created, wives had no legal identity of their own. They were only seen as wives, reproduction systems, and they were just used for labor and obedience, nothing else. And every time I see women having conversations about this exact topic, I go into the comments and there's a lot of people bringing in religion, okay? Talking about how God said that marriage needs to be a thing for people. It's in the Bible. But what they don't realize is religion did not invent marriage, it absorbed it, okay? Because Christian church did not formalize marriage as a sacrament until 1100 CE. That's way after marriage became a thing in the first place. Moral of the story, marriage was only a thing that was created to be able to control and take ownership of women. And then religion coming into that, it's just something that reinforces that control and that ownership over women. It reinforces men being able to be seen as the standard. And even today, I know that marriage is fluffed around as love and fairy tales and romance and, celebrating a commitment with someone. I get that, I do. But I also think that there is a lot of subconscious programming around the fantasy with marriage, the romanticization of it, because it keeps women conforming to that standard. It keeps women in that role. It keeps women in that very old patriarchal conditioning. There's so much more I could go into, but I will be here talking for like 2 fucking hours. But you guys just let me know what you think. Ladies, let me know what you think in the comments.
I keep seeing videos from some men wondering why women don't want to get married anymore. And I just want to explain this. Guys, women did not stop wanting love. They just realized that their lives are already great. Their bedrooms are immaculate. Their room smells like eucalyptus, lavender, and self-worth. Their bathrooms are like shrines. No beard hair in the sink. No pubes on the soap. No towel that's been damp since 2004. And there's a vibrator. Top shelf, fully charged, silent, resilient, never finishes early, never says women are too emotional. In short, women's lives are calm now. And then Chad wants to move in with his massive shoes kicked off middle of the living room and his emotional constipation. And you see, marriage used to be a survival strategy for so many women. Now women are standing there in their clean, quiet, orgasmically functional lives thinking, is this man going to add pleasure or is he about to fuck up my sleep schedule? Because if being with you means having to explain empathy, managing your moods, listening to you explain why your ex is crazy, or stepping over your shit like it's an obstacle course, then you're not really a partner, Chad. You're a pet project. And she already has a Labrador that looks at her like she's the most beautiful woman in the world. Single women today have their own lives, their own friends, their own routines, their own orgasms, and silence, which, let's face it, after 40 is basically porn. So when you show up and you're like, but I'm a nice guy, she's thinking nice doesn't beat calm. And if women aren't choosing you, it's not because of feminism. It's not the dating apps. It's feedback.
And if you want ultimate proof that the system is broken, just look at who is hitting the eject button. In the US and the UK, women initiate nearly 70% of all divorces. Among college-educated women, that number jumps to 90%. Women are the ones filing the paperwork because they are waking up 10 years in, completely drained, realizing that their life would actually be materially easier, quieter, and cleaner if they were just single. But you don't even need to look at divorce statistics to know the truth. You just have to talk to older women. There is this secret whisper network among women. If you ever sit down with an older woman, even one who has been happily married for 30 years, and you catch her in a truly honest, quiet moment, she will lean in and tell you the exact same thing. Don't get married, focus on yourself, keep your own money, travel. They know. The women who paved the way and lived through the reality of these institutions are actively telling the younger generation to take a different path. We aren't rejecting love. We aren't rejecting connection. We are rejecting a bad deal. We are refusing to sign a contract that requires us to sacrifice our peace, our health, and our ambition just to say we have a husband. I really want to hear from you guys on this one. How are you navigating this shift? Are you feeling this exact same burnout just from watching the women around you? Let me know in the comments below. If you resonated with this, please hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with the women in your life. Also, check out the audiobook for my book, Decentering Men, and check out the link in my bio for more tools on how to decenter men and center yourself. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.